What is the best class to solo in LOTRO? Great question. I would love to tell you. The best class to solo is the class that you enjoy playing the most. I know, it sounds obvious, right? But hear me out. Every single person I've met has been completely convinced that the class they love the most is the best class to solo. That is because they fell in love with their class, invested time to learn the intricacies, and have now become proficient in that class. If you fall in love with the game, the chances are that you will be spending hundreds of hours playing the game with that class, so choose wisely. I want you to pick a class that you are most excited to play and go from there. We will evaluate each class on 5 parameters: damage, survivability, convenience, complexity, and transition into endgame rating. Let's take a look in alphabetical order at what makes each class unique to help you make your decision. Beornings can do it all: heal, tank, DPS, buff, and it's super fun turning into a bear. I have watched bears solo 3-man level cap instances. Crazy, right? In Redline they do a decent amount of damage, but their survivability is insane. In healing spec they can heal across an entire raid, making them almost a must-have on every raid, so you'll always have a spot in the roster. You don't see many tank bears running around, not for lack of being able to tank, but more due to the fact that they struggle to hold initial aggro in a fight, since their mechanism of generating threats is different from, say, a guard. But I digress. Bears have a unique mechanism called Wrath instead of power generation. They can build their own Wrath by utilizing certain skills. Bears offer a medium complexity to gameplay because of the need to manage Wrath, and also the switching between man and bear form. But I confess, it is super cool to be able to play as a bear. Bears have a crazy movement speed buff of 62%, which means that they can move faster than some horses out there. This makes them super convenient when running across the landscape to get after mobs. They are, however, a melee class, so you do have to get up close and personal to deal damage. But at the same time, you can survive pulling multiple mobs at a time. Bear's main role in raiding is that of raid-wide healer. That does mean that you will likely be building 2 sets of everything: a damage build for landscape and a healing build for raiding. Not many people play Bear, and because of their versatility, it will be easy for you to find a group to raid with. Brawler is the latest class for LOTRO and is still undergoing development. You can get access to Brawler when you purchase the Gundabot expansion or through the LOTRO store. Brawlers literally go around Middle-earth punching everyone. It is so much fun. I think of the Brawler as a mashup between a champ and a captain. The Brawler has some powerful AoE skills and can buff themselves up to where they become amazing tanks if played right. Brawler only has 2 trait lines, a damage line and a tanking line. The damage line is easiest to learn, and as a solo player will probably be the one you use the most. The Brawler lacks in self-healing abilities, but the buffs do compensate for that. More or less, as long as you remember to keep the buffs up. Thus, survivability of a Brawler is much more proactive management of buffs versus reactive heals to damage. Brawlers have a unique mechanic where they are able to build metal with specific skills. Metal will unlock access to higher and more powerful skills. So they are of average difficulty to play because you need to manage your metal to gain access to specific skills you will need. The Brawler came out only a couple of weeks before the latest game update, and thus they've not yet established their place on a solid raid roster, simply because there aren't enough people out there yet to know how to play the class to their full potential. Those that have mastered the Brawler often find themselves in the tanking role, taking a beating because of their high survivability. We will have to keep an eye on them to see what kind of class they grow into. Burglars are able to sneak in and out of camps and never be noticed by the enemy. They are the assassins that get around most obstacles by hiding. This makes them a super fun and relatively easy class to solo play. Have to get past the troll? Just sneak around it. They also do a decent amount of damage, and if treated right and weapons max, they can even one-shot some enemies from behind. They also have one of the most powerful self-heals in the game, making them super survivable. Personally, I absolutely refuse to spar with a Burglar, no matter what class I'm on. A Burglar can mez you and do damage. They can hide from you so you don't know where they are or when they will strike. They can keep themselves alive and thus become very dangerous. Complexity of a Burglar is average, simply because you have a limited amount of damage skills, although they are powerful and have to thus make use of your other mechanics like hiding, attacking from the rear, and mezzing. The best part of a burglar is that you get to pick pockets. I highly recommend picking the pockets of mobs before you kill them because you'll get more rewards that way. In a raid environment, the burglar has two roles: crowd control, that is mezzing the mobs, and debuff the boss by making him either more susceptible to damage or making him deal less damage to the tanks. On raids that I've been without a burg, their absence is definitely noticed. In short, you will be in a support role in a raid, and thus will need two builds: a damage build for landscape quests and a support build for raids. The captain is probably one of the toughest classes to solo through Middle-earth, because they are built more as a support class for a raid than a damage class. Their damage is pretty pitiful compared to a hunter, but hey, you do get a herald that runs after you and does everything you tell it to. Well, okay, you can only give it 3 commands, and they are somewhat lazy as it takes them forever to be ready to take your next command. On the plus side though, Cappies are super survivable with all their healing skills and tanking skills. This makes it possible for them to go into 3-man instances and take like 1 Cappy and 2 Hunters, for example, because the Cappy can tank and heal the group at the same time. The Cappy is able to rest 2 players during combat, making them handy to have around, plus they can summon anyone from anywhere to wherever they are in Middle-earth. They have an awesome skill called Oathies that increase their damage and their fellowship damage by 35%, which is major. In a raid environment, they pretty much just need to know where to place their banner, when to throw Oathies on the target, and heal the group, if they're playing red Cappy. If they are playing yellow Cappy, that means they are tanking and healing. Cappies are easy to play and great for those who plan on playing in a group. You will probably have to have 2 builds, one for red line and one for yellow line, unless you just choose to specialize on one. Champions are the damage beasts, as their AoE skills are off the charts. You can easily pull 13 targets and just mow them down with your AoE skills and not worry about it. The trick though is to recognize that it is a waste of your time to kill 1 target at a time. As a champ, you are more powerful the more targets you are killing. The exception to this is if you have a target that can reflect damage, then you can kill yourself by hitting too many targets. For champs, it is important to know when to AoE and when to single target when grouping up. Survivability is typically not a problem for champs because they wear heavy armor, making themselves more tank-like. They have only a couple of self-heal abilities, not as strong enough to be a tank, but enough to where they can easily do landscape quests on their own. Champs are an easy class to learn and one of that I think a lot of people enjoy. It is a melee class, so you will have to do more running to get in range of your targets, but then again, you can kill 13 targets at once, while a hunter can only kill 1 target fast. You will probably only need to do 1 build, and that will be your redline DPS build. The Guardian was the first class I ever created, and I've been playing this specific tune for 12 plus years. Guardian is one of my favorite classes to play because of how robust they are, and they are extremely difficult to kill. Yes, they are the tanks, and with a good healer, they can become indestructible. But they are an absolute pain to solo. Although not as hard as the Cappy, since recent reworks have given their damage line a boost. If you're on a guard and finding that in a particular instance you're dying too quickly, the easiest solution is just to turn on tank mode. This means you'll deal less damage, but you'll also be impossible to kill, making getting through the solo content easier. Guards are great for picking up mobs and running them around. They have a skill called Thrill of Danger, which allows them to heal up every time something hits them, and they can use it every minute. This is part of what makes them indestructible. Guards are easy to learn to play, but it is a ton more fun when you have friends around. They will love you because you will take all the damage and they can just fire away. When transitioning to raids, you can focus on building up your tank build. Your tank gear will often suffice for your damage build as well. In my opinion, the Hunter is the easiest class to play and is great for beginners. As a Hunter, you deal a lot of damage, allowing you to easily solo much of the content. For my LOTRO Epic walkthrough videos, I choose to play as a Hunter, because this class has also been the quickest to get through content. Champ would have been my second choice. Hunters have so much versatility in how they do damage. You can be red damage line, go strength stance, and do a lot of damage, but this reduces your ability to move around and generate focus. You can swap to precision stance that allows you to generate 1 focus every 5 seconds. You need to focus to unlock powerful skills. Or you can go blue line, which means you can run around and shoot things, but you will be doing less damage. Play around with it and see what you enjoy the most. The two best things about the Hunter is that early on in the game you can get ports to almost every place you go. You are the only class that can port an entire fellowship out of a place and back to town. The other incredibly useful skill is that you can track mobs, whether nature, foes, or shadow. This means you cut down on the amount of time searching for that elusive bog lurker you need to destroy. Hunters are always welcome in raids because of the amount of damage they can do far outweighs the other classes. It is common to take 4 hunters into a 12-man raid, so there are plenty of opportunity. The biggest con of a hunter, though, is that they are super squishy, and that they can only wear medium armor, meaning that in a raid they need to be protected. But the benefit, though, is that you will not have to learn a new playstyle, for if you're red line damage for landscape, you'll be running that for raid as well, which means you will only need to work on one build. I do confess that Loremaster has been one of the classes that I've personally struggled the most to get excited about. The earlier levels of LM can be very daunting as you have limited damage skills and you need to rely on your pet to tank. It is a completely unique playstyle in that you have to work with your pets. You cannot simply ignore them and go about doing damage. Also, you need to spend time learning which of your skills will debuff a boss, making your damage skills do a lot more damage. Because of all of this, I'd say Loremasters is of average difficulty to learn to play. But hey, if you love pets, then this is definitely the class for you, and it's a totally legit reason to play an LM. LMs are pretty squishy, and so I have to rely on self heals to get through some of the group content. They can also have a hard time on landscape, but if they use their pets and their skills wisely, they can actually do massive amounts of damage, which means they don't have to rely on survivability. In the raiding environment, they play a support role where they handle crowd control, putting debuffs on the boss, placing stun immunity on tanks, sharing power when it's needed, supplementary healing, and rotating through their pets to give their fellowship buffs. You will likely want to have 2 builds, a damage line and a support line. My Minstrel is my absolute favorite class to play in raids, and if you've seen any of my live streams, you'll likely see me on my Minstrel. The Mini's damage line is the red line, where she does ranged tactical damage to her enemies. Where she lacks in single target damage, she makes up for in AoE damage. At endgame right now, there are some red minstrels doing as much damage as hunters, so they are forced to reckon with. Mini is one of the classes that has 3 stances, so even if you're running the red damage trait line, you can still swap to resonance stance, which will give you powerful self heals. Often you can heal yourself up to full health while fighting a mob, and then quickly swap back to dissonance stance and do a lot of damage. This flexibility means that Mini has high survivability, and if played right can even tank mobs through kiting, since many of your skills can be used while moving. The Mini is pretty straightforward to learn. There are plenty of damage skills, so one will always be ready to use, and you don't have to manage difficult combinations. The only hassle is that you need to keep your anthems up at all times, because they allow you to do a lot more damage. The most convenient skill that minstrels have are in combat reses, and is probably the #1 reason that they get taken into raids. Well, okay, that and their healing. They are a powerhouse at healing and buffing their fellowship, and are often relied on for that capacity. If your goal is to raid on your minstrel, know that you will need to work on 2 builds. Your DPS build for landscape questing, and your healing build for raiding. As a healer, you get to decide who lives and who dies in your raid. Ha 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 ha. Runekeepers, like hunters, are a blast to play. They are ranged DPS class that can deal a lot of damage. You can either play as a lightning arcade doing immediate damage, or you can play as a fire arcade that does damage over time. The lightning arcade definitely has more satisfaction because you see instant results, but the fire arcade does overall more damage at the moment. For landscape quests, I prefer running a lightning arcade, but for a group, I would run a fire arcade because the boss fights tend to be really long. Survivability for an arcade is not a problem because you can easily change attunement from full out DPS to full out heals with one skill, through a bunch of heals on yourself and keep going. Even though you have to wear light armor and are squishy, you have a lot more healing skills and abilities than a hunter if used correctly. Arcades are pretty straightforward to learn to play. The only trick is you need to get used to the attunement system. In that you can either be doing flat out, full out damage or full out healing, but not really well at the same time, like a minstrel could. But The most convenient thing about the RK is their DNF, or Do Not Fall skill, that they can keep up on 2 players. This skill means that their target player can instantly be rezzed upon death. This is super convenient, especially in fights where you have to keep the tank and the healers alive at all times to succeed. In a raid environment, you would be either running as a DPS, but more likely you will be asked to be a healing RK. Healing RKs is probably the easiest healer to learn in the game, and typically is only required to focus on the tank for healing. However, this does mean that you will likely have 2 or 3 builds depending on whether you have heal, lightning, and fire build. I know some people are going to disagree with me, but in my experience, Warden has been the most difficult class to play because of the gambit system. The gambit system is unique to the Warden. You have 3 primary skills that you then use to build multiple combinations of to gain access to higher level skills. There's actually a chart that will show you all the possible combinations on what they do. I would not recommend the Warden as the first class that you choose to play. However, I have seen some Wardens do amazing things. A Warden is a one-man fighting machine in that it can tank, DPS, and heal depending on what gambits it deploys. And before you ask, some heals are for the entire fellowship. Their damage type is also interesting, in that their powerful damage skills are actually damage over time skills, meaning the longer the fight goes, the more deadlier the Warden becomes in the total amount of damage they are doing. Wardens do get access to ports just like hunters, however they can only port themselves and not their entire fellowship like a hunter. In raids, Wardens are often found in the DPS role, and because of their damage over time skills, will usually only focus on the boss and not on ads. Wardens can be a ton of fun and versatile if you are up for the challenge. What is the best class to play? It completely depends on you. I would pick one you like the most and sounds fun to play, and then try it for a couple of levels. If it doesn't feel right to you, go try another class. There's nothing that says you can't change your mind. The Hunter ranked the best for damage, convenience to travel around, easy to learn, and easy to transition to raiding. Thus, my recommendation would be to get started with the Hunter and then go from there. I promise you will have a blast. If you enjoyed today's video, please hit the like and subscribe button. For more amazing training and one-on-one coaching, please click the link to the LOTRO Endgame Challenge in the description below. This is a special 2-day training event where I help players plan out their exact strategy for reaching their goals in endgame raiding. Whether you've just Valored a tune or are returning to the game after some time, this challenge will show you exactly what you need to do to gear up quickly, find a great raiding group, and have loads of fun racing through endgame content. Thanks for watching.